Welcome to the next question. I'm Jenny.
I'm Austin.
I'm Chi-Chi.
So today, ladies, we have Brene Brown with us.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
She is a New York Times bestselling author of books like Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, Dare to Lead. She's also a sociology researcher focused on shame, vulnerability, and courage. She also has a TED Talk that I think has like 48 million views or something. So no pressure, but
Also The Gift of Imperfection.
which is our
that one.
yes,
our
which is
favorite
our
book.
collective favorite.
Yes.
So ladies, what did we love about this conversation?
Well, we've been listening to Brené talk for a long time about shame and vulnerability, but it doesn't often penetrate specifically into the lives of women of color and how being vulnerable and being courageous and being brave can have extra costs associated to it. So it was so good to sit down with her and to say, Brené, but what about marginalized people?
Yeah.
What does all of this research have to say for us who are dealing with so many systemic issues?
Yeah. And I really loved how we kind of got to some of the tough questions, like when you start talking about human connection, like what's at the core of all of this division? Because so many times it can become an issue, but we forget like what it was supposed to be. The fact that we're supposed to be connected to each other and the fact that we're not is what really causes all of these problems. And I really appreciated her willingness to go there and to, to have some really tough dialogue and, but also in the same way to imagine what a better world could look like, especially, between white women and Black women and women of color, and that was a part where we don't often get to do that.
Yes.
Like kind of name the thing, name ways that white women have hurt women of color, but also imagine a different way. Yeah. And that was really, I thought it was a really special conversation.
Yeah. Totally. I think one of my favorite parts of just doing the series in general is when our guest will say, like, I don't usually talk about this, or I've never been asked this question. And she said that a couple times. And that felt really just special that we were tapping into a side of her that is very much there. Like to hear about her, being in like grad school, reading bell hooks, and just that she has been, she's been in this work for a long time, eyes wide open. And for her to have an outlet to really kind of like, to really dive in was just, it felt kind of like an honor to create that kind of a space together with her. Yeah. So.
Should we get to it?
Yeah. It's time for the next question.
Brené, it seems that you have become more and more vocal about racial justice issues. Is there a recent moment that has sparked this, or some sort of personal change that has made you much more vocal about equity?
I love all the warm-up questions. I really, I was like, hell, we're here. Okay, so let me tell you the weird story. I'm a social worker. I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in social work. Like the first class I ever took was like, structural oppression and genocide. Like this is just how we're trained. And so I was raised on a very healthy dose of bell hooks.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, huge. I mean, when I first started teaching my first year in the doctoral program, I would sleep with Teaching to Transgress next to my bed with her picture up. So when I saw it in the morning, I was like, because I wanted to control the classroom. And, and everything that she said was like, education is liberation. Let it go. And I was like, be aware of your whiteness. And so I think I've always been, even if you go back to, I thought it was just me, which was like before the gifts of imperfection. I write about race, privilege. It's like it was weird to me that like we use the term white supremacy. When I was in graduate school, like I was like, well, that just seems like a technical accurate term for what's happening. And then I think there was a lulling into complacency, and kind of always aware of it. And then, so I think I've always written about it and talked about it. I just think it was always to the converted. And so I think, do you know what I mean? So now I think
Your audience has expanded so much since then. Yeah.
and it's so interesting because I'll put something out there and they're like, oh my God, you become so radical. And I'm like, page 155, 20 years ago, every paper I've ever written, like, no, you've become so complacent. Like, and so I think I have a bigger audience now, but I don't think I don't think I've changed that much. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Who introduced bell hooks to you? Like, where did that come from?
Who introduced bell hooks to me? Probably either Jean Cantabu-Latting, one of my mentors in graduate school, Karen Stout, another mentor, or Barbara Nowak, all kind of mentors for me in graduate school. But we read, and I'm rereading her right now. I'm rereading the trilogy, The Love.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm having to find, I'm really working on a new strategy like this month. Yeah.
For like learning
what does that
or
mean?
like how you're...
It's like they got my hate. Like I swore that they wouldn't take my hate, but they got my hate. And then after the El Paso and Ohio shootings, like I haven't been online in over a month.
Wow.
Like not Instagram, nothing. Like I'm just something, I have to shift something. And so I'm trying to think maybe I've abandoned love too much. So I'm rereading bell hooks right now. And I think I have to start fighting. I have this theory that if you're motivated by hate, it's just not sustainable. And I'll tell you this, I've not ever talked about this publicly, so these ideas are percolating. Like, be gentle with me on social media as you watch this. I think, let me think about this for a minute. I'm not filtering, I'm just really thinking about my thought. I'm a pauser. I don't think like hate and shame fueled activism is sustainable.
I think there are a lot of movement builders who would say the same thing. And I think they would add anger, actually, to that list.
I would add anger, too.
Right, that it can maybe be a catalyst, right?
Yeah.
But for sustainability.
I don't think what doesn't work for me, and I find myself in these arguments like, you're in your whiteness when you argue for privilege. I mean, for civility. You're in your whiteness when you're saying, no hate. But I just wonder. I look at the health outcomes for disenfranchised, marginalized populations. I look at blood pressure. I look at even women my age, like their rage, like. What a price to pay. You're paying with your life. And so, and then it was really hard, and I'll be curious to see what y'all think about this. This is the part I haven't talked about. I thought for like the last year that it was maybe a return to my faith, where I would find a sustained fighting energy.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not with the Christians right now. I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time.
I find myself redefining
what it means.
Yeah.
Because because I grew up Christian, evangelical, and for the last 3 years I've had I mean, just a complete. It all fell apart. Where there were some things that happened specifically after a certain election where I was just like, I do not understand this. Like, I don't understand how our faith is. This is how it's manifesting, and I had to start from the beginning of just saying, what does this mean? And it doesn't. My faith now doesn't look like what it did 5, 10, even when I was younger. It has become this. For me, it's more about how do I show up in the world and see, and the decisions that I make, how do they affect the whole, not just me, even as a Black woman. Because I think I resonate when you talk about you can't let hate be the thing, because at the end of the day, I found myself getting to the point where I don't even care if you're okay. I don't care if you ever understand that your privilege is wrong. demolish the whole thing. Let's just move forward. But like, how far does that actually get us?
I don't know. I mean, it's the right question.
Right. You know, are we just recreating what we've lived in now? Or are we actually creating something new and imagining a world where there is actual connection and believing that real community can exist? Because there's a period of time, and I still struggle with it. I didn't know if that was possible. I was like, I don't know if we can actually live together.
I think I'm living in that question right now. Like, and it so goes against everything I believe.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't see church helping.
No. Right. No.
Yeah, it's definitely not it's not leading on anything.
It's not leading.
It's not pastoring. It's not showing up, and
It's not telling the truth.
it's not telling the truth. I think it's marketing, and it's staying safe, and it's staying quiet, and it's trying not to like ruffle too many feathers. And I don't think that's not the origins of the faith that I grew up in. I don't recognize it today. So I think I'm going back to who are the people that are, shifting the lens, helping me see it more like within the confines of what's happening today. Like you can't be having it just be like all ideology without it actually being implemented into today. Whose life is different because of their faith. Those are the people I want to be around.
That's right. I mean, reading your book got a lot of airtime, and airtime is not good for books in my house because if I read something that's hard, I just toss it right across my bedroom when
that makes me so happy.
Yeah, like your book hits some walls. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
love it.
The pain.
It disappoints me when I ask people, did you throw it? And when people say no, I'm like, oh, okay.
No, but I mean, like,
why not?
I threw it. It just pain. Because, I mean, I think this is the question that I'm wrestling with right now. And I won't articulate it well because it's a new thought, but I wanted to share it with y'all because if not here, where, right? There comes a moment, like when I'm reading your book, and I've had this moment 100 times, and which is probably 99 times more than most people who are white and have privilege. But there comes a moment where I have to decide whether you're bullshitting me or the pain is real. I don't care if I'm reading Toni Morrison Beloved. I don't care whether I'm reading your book. There's just a pinpoint. There's a moment where I have to say, is this true? And every part of me is like, I mean, it's just hardwired in me. No, this is not true. She's exaggerating. This couldn't happen. They couldn't treat her like this at work. Now, this is a Christian place. I fight you.
Yep.
And then I always ask myself, why is it so hard to believe it's true? And the answer is pain. Pain. And it's like we have no tolerance for it. We have no tolerance. And all these really important, really valuable analyses of power and privilege are important, but we're not talking about pain.
Brené, this is such a great segue because one of the reasons why we were so excited to talk to you is because it can be really difficult to talk about what the themes in your book mean for women of color, right? Because it sounds really nice that Black women are going to be courageous and brave and authentic and vulnerable, but the price to pay for that in the workplace, for my story to be used against me, for me to not be able to have playfulness, to not be able to be goofy because I'm representing all Black women who will ever pass through these doors again. It is so hard. It's genuinely hard to read and resonate with so much. And then to think, where could I possibly put this into practice that won't cause more pain for me?
Because I think on the flip side, and I'll just add and love for you to respond, but I think you're talking about people shying away from pain. I think Black women, we're like a pain vacuum, like we live in this constantly, and it creates this shell that is so hard to, and I think we're beginning to talk more about this, like how, like that's why we talk about joy being resistance and rest being resistance. Like these things that should be just commonplace to people, it's like this active resistance because you're fighting through so much of that. And so it's like that flip side of like who's holding all this pain, and then when we're sharing our pain, it's like, I don't know if I believe you. That can't be true, you know? And so I think that's the struggle, you know, when you're sharing these things. It's like, and then someone doubts you and you're like, okay, I don't know what else I could say about that,
Well, and then how do you not internalize that and start to, you're like, maybe it isn't that big of a deal. Maybe I like, so it all becomes, yeah, totally. But it becomes like a,
No, I mean, I think it's the right question. I mean, I think it's like, it resonates with you and you read it and I talk to, and it's not just women of color, it's any group that is marginalized in any space says, yeah, I want to be vulnerable too, but this armor keeps me alive.
Yeah. Right.
It keeps me employed.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so I understand you want me to take it off. So here's the dilemma that we're all trying to figure out. Like, we have a belonging belief statement. It's like our equity inclusivity statement for my organization. And we have, you know, I think it's number 5 and 6 and one of them says, we believe when we ask that many people wear armor to stay alive, to stay emotionally safe, sometimes physically safe, and asking them to take it off is asking them to risk physical, emotional, spiritual danger. Then the next one says, but we believe asking generations of people to have to wear armor every day until we achieve perfect justice is an unfair ask. So until there are more Black women leading, modeling vulnerability, making it safe, calling out people who said, did you just use her vulnerability against her? Did you just use what she shared? You know, until that, what is the answer?
Right.
I mean, the thing is, there has got to be systemic change. We cannot see the micro and the macro apart.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we have to move policy-wise more representation into leadership where there can be protection, there can be mentoring, there can be, you know, safety, real safety, right? And at the same time, how do we say, you know what, it could be better for people in 40 or 50 years, you'll need to wear the 500 tons of armor every day, even if it freaking kills you in the process. You know, so like, how can we do that? And I have to say that I would think the most organic ally for women of color in taking off armor and showing up authentically should be white women.
Yeah, should be.
right.
I mean, I think it speaks to how much whiteness is a drug.
I was gonna say,
right?
you're choosing your whiteness over your womanhood.
Yeah, that even, like, I watch the ways that white women suffer upholding white supremacy, right? Like, you're not benefiting from this. You're right? Like
there's something
your
else.
soul isn't benefiting from this. Maybe I should be specific.
Right,
like your spirit, your personality,
might
your
benefit from it,
right, is not benefiting from this. And by separating from my pain, you're separating from your own pain.
Totally.
And I think there's something else, and I just don't, like, I hate saying it, but I know it's true. It's also about men. It's also it's also about, I have made a deal. Yeah. I am in a contract right now. And in order for me to get what I need, I will catch the drippings of the power from the white men around me. And I will take those drippings and carve them, shape them into something for me. So that explains that white female evangelical vote. You know, that explains, like, so it is a layer, it is layers of race, gender, class. It's almost like it's easier for me to take the scraps of power and do whatever I need to do to you than it is to fight for my own. Because, you know, generations, myself included, were not raised that way. Right. And so I don't know. I've come to the belief, this is my new belief, along with love, which I'm trying to get to. Right now, I'm just pissed off.
Which I think is fair.
Yeah,
maybe pissed off comes before love.
Maybe pissed off comes
so.
to fair.
I think it does. I don't.
But like 5 years of
I mean,
pissed
I
off,
don't
like,
know.
I'm tired of being
But
mad.
think about how long we've been doing this.
Yes.
You
Forever.
know? Yeah. So 5 years in the span of things. I mean, I think there's so much that we have to reckon with, that we have to wrestle with. And part of it too, I think, is actually, and I'm not old enough to feel like I can say this really, but I think it's cyclical. I think that there are times when we feel like, because I think the march towards justice is like 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, you know? And I think that there are times when we feel like, okay, we're actually making progress. And then there are times when it's like, wait, what?
Progressions, regressions,
Exactly,
progressions,
exactly.
regressions. I really think white male power over, not power with and to, but power over is really feeling like they're making a last stand.
Yeah.
Totally. It's like this final roar before hopefully,
And I think last stands are violent and dangerous. I mean, people are fighting for their lives. And and I really believe that the systems in place, I don't believe in neutrality.
Agree.
Totally.
Yeah.
I believe you're either maintaining the systems or you're dismantling them. And for me, that looks like when I'm asked to speak somewhere, I think about what it is they want me to talk about. And for the last 3, I've just turned them down and said, this should be a woman of color. Like, I'm not going to do that. You know, like, follow, listen, you know, let others lead who have the
That
experience.
is not what white men want to hear.
That's not what anybody
wants.
right? No white people at all, white men or women, want to hear that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we've got a real, I mean, I even think about the opioid epidemic being evidence of somehow we've equated success with, if you're successful, that means you don't feel pain. Like, we have no need, like, and pain is a part of the human experience. It's how we grow and stretch, and it's the stretch marks, and it's the, you know, and so I don't think we can get where we need to go around race, gender, any of it, unless we get, you know, we're so good at causing pain and very bad at feeling pain.
Yeah. I think your work is amazing, but I've also seen it being used to, you know, as a way of like shielding, white people shielding themselves from, like, you know, racism, or even talking about, it's like, well, shame is bad. Don't talk, you know, don't shame me. I'm not a racist.
Like, don't call me racist.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like
You're shaming me.
that's a shame, you know. And I think, and I don't know that stems from your work, but I think shame has become more of a vernacular that we use these days. But as you're talking, I think there is that that need for people. And I think I think it is a struggle for white people to sit in pain. Because yes, that's a hard thing to hear. But if you don't recognize that and recognize that that's a wound in you, because I think sometimes when we say, well, I think that was a, you know, racist thing, or that person is racist, like, it's like, oh, well, you know, don't say a bad thing about me. But it's identifying a wound, because that is a break in connection with humanity.
Yeah, with self, with the world, with God.
And
like,
so all of those things. So it's just like naming that thing. But people get so like, I don't want to deal with that. And then, you know, and so for people like that, I feel like there's nothing else I can say. If we can't start there and say, yes, this is a racist tendency. I have racist tendencies in the world. If you don't want to say I'm racist, whatever. But if you can't start there, then how do you move forward from that? And so I think that, like, that being able to sit in the pain of that and say, and say, yes, like, my history is filled with this. There is, you know, there has been abuse, there's been genocide, all of that falls in the line of how I get to sit here in this privilege today. And now what? You know, how do we move forward? How do I hear things? How do I listen? How do I follow?
Right. I mean, it makes me like, can shame be a tool towards like better?
I don't believe so.
Really?
Like, I absolutely do not believe I believe shame is a tool of oppression. It will never be an effective social justice tool, ever. It is the tool of stigmatizing, reducing, dehumanizing. I do not believe it will ever be a social justice tool. I mean, I think about, I took this whole course on Audre Lorde, and I think about this whole idea of the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. That shame is the tool of the patriarchy. It's the tool of nationalism. It's the tool of supremacy. Why would we ever pick it up to dismantle those things?
Even hearing you use those other words, dehumanization, like that's helpful, right? Because so many people use shame and discomfort, or shame and I don't like that, right? And interchangeably, as opposed to, like dehumanization, very different from I've made you uncomfortable.
I'm not dehumanizing by saying you're racist.
I would say, so here's what I would say as the shame purist. I would say there is a difference between that is a racist statement, a racist belief, and you are a racist. I would say there's a big difference, and I'll tell you what the difference is. And I know I'm in weird territory here talking about this. Let's just take it out of this realm and use a very simple example. You've got a child. This is always a debate when I do parenting work, who has told you a lie, and you said, you can't do that. You can't lie. What is the difference between that and saying, hey, you're a liar? The difference is that shame corrodes our belief that we can change or be better. So if you are a racist, there is no intervention point. What is the change? It's who you are. If you're a liar, it's who you are. If you're bad versus you made a bad choice as a kid, you're just bad. And so the way shame is specifically disproportionately used as a classroom management tool with children of color, with poor kids, with kids, And so the difference is if you say, that is a very racist response, or there is so much deep racism, in that. There is an intervention point. I have to change a belief or behavior. This is not about who I am.
Dr. Kendi just came out with this book.
How to Be Anti-Racist.
And in his introduction, he talks about the fact that we can toss around who's racist and who's not forever, try to scale it up and take a test and here's your quiz, all these things.
I would love that, actually.
And he's like, but at the end of the day, we have to deal with the racist thought. With the racist policy, with the way racism is manifesting itself in the world, and leave who is and who isn't at the door, because trying to figure that out isn't working.
It's taking too much of our energy and focus off of actually dismantling these things that are maintaining it, whether or not we're involved or not.
Right, and I think that's the hard thing about shame. It's like, I'm a worrier when it comes to my kids and things, and I'm always worst case scenarioing things, even though I tell people not to do that in my books. Researcher, heal thyself. I get it. I'm working on it. You have to be Freud to know why I write about shame and these things, because I suck at all of them. But if I thought you could shame someone into changing, even knowing how much pain shame causes us, I would probably do it. But what we know, I probably would, just because to protect my kids, to protect the things I believe in. But here's what we know. If you look at shame proneness in the general population, it is so highly correlated with blame, rationalization, violence, suicide, addiction, depression, aggression. Shame is not a moral compass. What it causes us to do is to double down. Defend, blame, rationalize. Does that make sense? And so if someone said to me, I just think, if a teacher says to me, God, you're stupid. How do you get out from underneath that? As opposed to, look, you made a D-. Real stupid decision not to study for this test. You know, who you are versus the choices you make. It's a huge difference. And we have like massive outcome. Because I'll tell you the difference between shame and guilt is, and I've never had a conversation about race where I did not painfully have to learn one new like blind spot, ever. And I just keep getting in them because that's the only way through, right? I mean, that's it. That's it. Right. And I think I'll tell you the other thing. It's very different for me than I think, because I am a social worker and because I've spent the last 22 years at the University of Houston, most racially, ethnically diverse research university in the country. So my class is always, 25% African American, 25% white, 25% Latina. I mean, it's that when I ask questions like, tell me your instant bias, then it's always, a Black student will raise their hand and say, if you cut me off and you got an old car and you get out and you're Asian, I'm gonna be like, hey, this isn't China. I won't, like the Black students are talking about their racism and bias. The Asian students are talking about it. The Muslim students are talking about it. I remember I wrote about this in one of the books. It may have been Daring Greatly, I don't remember, but we did an exercise where everyone in the class had to talk about their privilege and what privilege they had. Because I'm like, you got something, because this is graduate school. So you got some privilege somewhere, right? We're in graduate school.
Right.
And I remember there was just quiet. And I think the white students were really nervous. Like they were like, oh man, she doesn't understand how it works. She said, this is like a white exercise. And finally, a young Black woman raised her hand and she said, I wear my faith around my neck every day. And she had a cross. And she said, and I can wear it without people assuming that I'm dangerous or I'm trying to kill them. Then a Latino student raised his hand and said, I love to go to the movies. I love to hold hands with my wife. I don't have to worry about getting hit over the head with a baseball bat because I'm holding hands with someone, and it was the most deeply humanizing, like white supremacy is as real as us sitting in this beautiful living room. If we don't call it that, we can't fix it that. Like all the people from Texas who are like, oh my God, those are our statues. I'm like, what makes me so proud of being a Texan is know better, do better. Do you know what I mean? Like changing the, Albert Sidney Johnston school to the Barbara Jordan proud Texas moment, but there's so much fear.
And it's the way the system is set up. It's set up to create fear and to separate us so that we don't think about, and I think, I think we, we were just talking about, white women and women of color, like that division, that's intentional, right? So,
it serves tons of.
Exactly. Yeah. You take this little, you get the rest of those little scraps and then, and then we're like fighting. Yeah. Right. When we know that there would be, like you said,
that's it.
It would be like our greatest ally. We would be each other's greatest allies. Like, Black women were a major part of like the feminist movement in the early part, even when they knew that they weren't going to get the right to vote. Like there were Black women saying like, I'm still going to fight for this. So I think we see what happens, but then white supremacy says, you're better off separate. And, this will be better for us in the end of the day, like, and we get nothing done. We just keep like fighting for that.
A fight amongst yourself is like the most silent, dangerous tool of oppression.
Totally.
It is. And you see, we have an administration now that just pushes so much divisiveness and so much fear.
Fear everyone.
Yeah.
Fear everyone. Yep. Fear everything. Just
Every
be
day.
afraid.
Yeah. Be afraid
all the time.
Well, and it's working because I am.
It's totally working. It is like Power 101. If you just you want to rule the world, there's just a few secrets. 1, keep everyone really afraid. 2, give them someone to blame for their fear. And sell them certainty in times of mass vulnerability. That's it. That's it. That's all you have to do. Give them someone to hate, someone to blame, keep them afraid, and peddle certainty when everyone's unsure. It sounds good to me. but I'm really afraid. I just know it just makes everybody crazy and dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know how to I have all these random disparate thoughts, but I heard an interview with you where you're defining blame as a way to discharge pain and discomfort. And then I'm quoting you again, where you can either have courage or you can have comfort. You can't have both. And I wonder if white women are choosing comfort over courage again and again, that there's a known with just maintaining white supremacy. There's a known with upholding the patriarchy that feels comfortable. And that is somehow appealing and keeping us complacent. Yes. Right? So what, how do you make courage, the inevitable?
Desirable.
How do you make that so compelling that it's worth to leave and I would say that I think your work is encouraging individuals to leave individual comfort. How do we take that and multiply it and make it a massive, let's all be doing this together?
I thought I was going to be at church. I thought I don't know. And I have moments, I'm Episcopalian, there are moments where, we had the Episcopal meetup of all the bishops and stuff recently in Texas, and they went to the detention centers on the border in full regalia, and they had an anti-gun rally, and so I was really proud at that moment of the Episcopal Church, because that's not how you keep the old white people with money at the church, So I don't know. I was hoping the faith communities would lead a little some of that, because it seemed like Jesus is a great example of someone who was willing to piss off people and be kind of a rebel around. Collective courage. It's interesting. I don't think it takes a whole lot of people. It takes a critical mass of people.
Yeah. Well, when I think about every social movement we've had, none of them have involved everyone.
No.
Right. No, there's always people.
There's always people who are fighting against it, right? But the committed push on anyway.
And I think it's policy. I think you've got to change policy. I think, oh man, I saw this graphic. Hold on, let me think about what it said. It was Angela Davis holding a sign that said, racism is systemic. Its violent outbursts are all connected. And so racism is systemic. Its violent outbursts are all connected. Rhetoric around immigrants that's dehumanizing. Yes. And then the El Paso shooting. Yes. Theory, action. And so we're reading the new anti-racism book as our organization, our company read right now. And the whole idea of system change, policy change. Yeah. And weirdly, in some ways, corporations are doing a better job than, they're much less tolerant in some ways than our government right now.
But I think that's, again, because of Title IX and other policies.
I think it's other policies
that are right. That say you must look at this.
And I think also though that we've seen all these companies kind of get reamed for doing things that are really insensitive. But I think there's also, not to be crass, but it's more profitable. The more diverse you are, the better you can, reach out to, because our world is just becoming more diverse. So I think at some point you have to start doing those things. You have to start changing if you want to keep making money, but our government doesn't have to.
But that's really, not only is that a really great point, I'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
So,
yeah.
I agree. I'll take it because it's really interesting when you go, because I do a lot of leadership work, and you'll go into these leadership events and you'll have people presenting and you can see that companies are pretty terrified because they're for the first time ever, there are consumers can organize online in 10 minutes and bring down, a brand or a company. Yeah. So these big companies that want diverse consumers need diverse leaders.
That's right.
Right? And so I'll take it that way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
We got to start somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I don't know. I just always is a big believer in, we should have a government that takes care of the most vulnerable people, and I just don't know that the government is
right. Do we really need to be changing hearts and minds if at the end of the day we can change the outcome? If we can, right?
I mean, that's
I think we have to do both, but I will take that.
Exactly. Yes. If the outcome changes.
Because when people are dying and on the street, then yes, I want the policy change, but I know that won't sustain us unless people are coming behind that. There is some sort of change, but. Trust me, I want both. I want protection.
I'm with you.
But I also want, I want, like, just for my own self and for the future of, my niece and my nephew and the kids that I see, I want a world where they don't have to keep struggling like this. Right. Like when I'm in a role, when I'm in a position, I'm like you're talking about, I always think about who's coming behind me and how am I creating a space where people are like, you know what, this is better.
Totally.
Like we may have had to do this, but now this is better because we are seeing things from a different perspective. There is no way you can make the best decision if everybody around the table is the same. You just can't.
Oh, you just can't.
It's just impossible.
I mean, there's just so much data on it now. Like just companies that have women, companies that have people of color, they just do better.
Right.
They perform better.
Exactly. And that's in every aspect, and I'm glad corporations are doing that, but I mean, churches should be doing this. Our schools should, look better. We see like the impact of, people who have teachers that look like them. Yeah. I didn't have a teacher that looked like a professor that looked like me or a teacher that looked like me until I was in grad school.
Yeah, I was in college.
What does that do to your, your psyche? And so in every space, I think we have to start doing that. But I'm hoping that, places that are modeling this because, it's better for their bottom line, it's going to start something, that we start seeing this everywhere, even in places where they're not making a profit, but we get better leaders, we get better employees, all of
it's just better. Yep. And not seeing yourself. Like not seeing yourself. I mean, I remember first year of my doctoral program, I went to I don't know, there was I forget, we had a new president coming in, so there's they send an academic from every university in the country, and they walk down in the line, like Harvard's first or the oldest university. And I just remember looking over to the person sitting next to me, and I was like, and he looked at me and he goes, "Pale male Yale." And I was like,
yeah.
Oh my God. Where? And then I got pregnant in my doctoral program. Yeah. And I remember the person telling me, my doctoral program director at the time, "We thought you were going to be somebody." Gosh. And I was like, it's like a baby, not a lobotomy. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, it's like,
my brain will still work.
Yeah, I can do this. But I just not seeing yourself reflected back in the world that you want to be a part of and make a contribution in.
Right. Well, and then that sends the message that you don't belong here.
And that's the painful message.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you have to be like us if you want to even attempt to belong here, right? It's not a fully open door.
We don't want to notice that you actually aren't one of us.
Right.
And I think that's what was painful about your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, painful. That's the only word I can think of. Eye-opening, healing, but right after the pain. There was the pain and then the other part. And I just think people are not willing to feel it.
Yeah. Well, I've said this to you. I think your book gave language to a lot of, similar to I think what you've talked about your work, that it's giving language to things that seemingly go kind of hidden or invisible until you actually let people into them. I know this isn't just like a yay for Austin's book, but it could be. Like when you go through...
I'm for it.
Okay, great. Like when you go through your day, I feel like that was like the ball game. Like that for so many people was like, holy shit, that was one day.
Yeah.
That was one day, and just thing after thing after thing that it's like weighing you down, and that you had no outlet for it. Yeah.
Well, and I know I think I read it before it was even published, so you sent it to me, and I remember I responded. I was like, "Thank you for writing this. This is my story." I felt like this is me on paper. Yeah. And we worked in the same institution. We didn't know each other until the very end. But I remember the first time we had coffee, and there were very few. I think.
Maybe 5?
Yeah.
Maybe. Out of 200?
Yeah, 5 women.
Not even women.
No, just 5
Black people.
Black people, yeah. So I remember sitting down with you and, I mean, I don't even know why we met, but I just remember it was like an hour or two later and we're like, why have we not...
Right.
I wanted to climb in her lap.
Yeah, it was just...
we were sitting there.
Just put your head on her shoulder,
It was the most healing... it was the most healing space that I'd ever... And we worked at a church.
Right.
And, and as I will always say, for Black women, the most healing space you can ever be in is with other Black women. Because at that moment, you're finishing each other's sentences. You don't even have to, but they know.
They believe you.
Exactly. You don't have to qualify it. And I think that is one of the most exhausting things is like when you are walking through this and you take the moment that you step out in courage and say, I'm going to share this with someone who's not like me, and they don't believe you.
It's so painful. It's so painful.
You know, and people wonder, they always talk about strong women, that Black women, and that is the reason, because you get that, you retreat right back and you like put that back up and you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna soldier through. And what kind of life is that? You know, that's not, you know, wholehearted living like you talk. That is not at all. Like it is just, you know, but it takes so much time to undo all of that. And I'm grateful because I think there is like this revolution between Black women where we're finding each other in more spaces and we're starting to say, even if the world doesn't support you, we got your back.
Yeah.
You know, we will be behind you as we do this, and hopefully I'm hoping that creates even more change, but it takes an army, you know, for every Black woman you see up there doing whatever she's doing, you know, there's a massive group of people behind her that are protecting her, cheering her, and saying,
listening,
we got you.
believing.
Yes, without question.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that and I'm not going to say that I have white women in my life that are amazing and will believe me. And that is a healing thing in itself when you're like, okay, now I've found you and I will hold on to you, but that's not everybody. And and it's hard to get into that. I don't know if you're the same way, but I'm very distrustful. I just assume the worst immediately.
With a resume, a cover letter.
Yeah.
You're a white woman.
I'm like, wait, what do you want? Like,
because the betrayal history.
Right.
I mean, it's like the betrayal history.
Yeah. There's a movie that Jenny and I saw when we were in college. I think it was like part 2 of The Color of Fear. I don't think it was the original Color of Fear. I think they did a couple more, and there's one with just women, multiracial women sitting in a group. And there was a white woman who was crying and talking about how she's trying to be loving and kind to the Black woman in the room, and the Black woman just ignores her and won't give her a chance, and it just hurts her heart that she isn't trusted. And the Black woman, you watch her inhale and exhale. And she says, I need you to know that every time I form a relationship with another white person, I am crawling on my hands and knees over the broken shards of other relationships where I was betrayed.
But I also believe, I read this, you cannot lead a diverse team if you do not lead a diverse life.
yes.
Well, hot damn.
Yeah.
Hot
Yes. Yes. I've been saying, oh my gosh. Yes.
Is that a great quote?
And that does not just mean being married to or having a child of color.
Right.
Oh my God, they think that's the golden ticket.
Right.
It's like, oh, my spouse, or like people talk about, we want to work on diversity in our company. Let's have a workshop. Let's have a class. I'm
Right.
like, that's
It's
not
not
gonna
a
do
one and
anything.
done.
Like if the people you're learning from is not a diverse group of authors, if you don't have a diverse group of friends, if you're not, the movies that you go see, the music that you listen to, the world that you immerse in, all of that stuff, you can't be reading the same people all the time and then say you care about diversity. Like, show me your life, and then I'll tell you whether or not
you care about diversity.
Well,
On your and in their neighborhoods.
Yes.
You know,
If you have to get on a plane to go somewhere to serve people of color.
No.
oh my gosh. Well, we used to do an activity when we would lead workshops where we gave everyone marbles, and then we went down a list, and it was like, what's the last 2 restaurants you went to? Did the people look like you or not? What's the last movie you watched? And down, and then you get this inventory of either, and usually
Here's your representation.
Here's your representation.
Are all your marbles white?
Yes, or are they a different color? And it was so powerful just to see that and to realize you have power over every single one of these choices.
That's right. This isn't big stuff.
Yeah, this is not crazy. Who did you invite over for dinner last Sunday?
Yep.
what book did you, no one is telling you cannot read books. Like what, like no one is screening you for movies. Like these are all things that you have
We want you to
agency
participate
over.
in culture.
Right. Yep. And hopefully that's
true, right?
Right.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, you know, and I think about the diverse life I've led and how I can't deny, like, I remember the first time, I'm a shopper for sure, but I can remember the first time I was ever followed in a store. I was with a Black friend.
Yeah.
And we were at the store that will remain unnamed. And we're just shopping.
This time.
Wait,
Right.
And I was like,
Well, Brene Brown outs this.
yeah, no, yeah, because it would not be a shockaroo in Texas about the store.
Okay.
And I was with my friend Eliza, and we were working together at Child Protective Services in in San Antonio, and I was like, God, this guy is like flirting hardcore. and Eliza was like, that is not what's happening. She looked at me, she goes, you cute, but you ain't that cute. And I was like, what? She goes, watch, I'll make him flirt with me. And I was like, what are you gonna do? And she said, I'm just gonna move over here 10 feet. And I was like, what is happening? And then I was like, oh my God, he's following us because you're Black. And he thinks we're shoplifting. I'm gonna go, and she's like, oh no, white savior, I do not need you. She's like, I gotta be back at work in an hour. I will not have time
Oh
to
my
go to
God.
jail right now.
But this is so real. The ways that Black women and other women of color, other people of color, have to navigate actual instances of racism on a regular basis and decide, I do not have time for the shenanigans.
Exactly.
No, like she's like, I was like, this is like unconstitutional. This is bullshit. She goes, oh my God, write about it in a paper for school or something. And I was like,
I got places to be.
Yeah, I did. Let me tell you what's happening. Then we go out on a visit, and we're in a hard neighborhood, and we're pulling up to a light, and there's a group of kids, and they look rough. And she goes, lock your door. And I was like, I'm not locking my door. And then I said, I'm not locking my door. I was like, that's so racist. And she said, I'm not dying because you're white guilt. Like, I'm not gonna die today because you're a white guilty girl. Lock your door. And I was like, and this was every interaction we had. So I was like, oh, and she goes, okay. Then, wait, this gets worse. Then, like a month later, I'm in Kansas City. And again, I'm doing work with a friend. She is Black. She goes, I've never had a white person over my house before. And I was like, you're old. Like, we're 40. Like, just like, we're old. And I said, and she's like, never. She's like, do you want to come over for dinner tonight? And I was like, yes. And she said, I'm going to make soul food. And I was like, I'm so excited because any kind of food, but soul food sounds really good. So it was so bummed out. We got to get to her house. She's like, come in. She was like, I was like, stop giving me the side eye. I'm not gonna shake anything. And she's like, all right. She goes, here's dinner. And it was like country ribs, greens. And I was like, oh, I was excited about soul food. And she's like, what? And I said, I was excited that we were gonna eat soul food. And she said, this is soul food. And I said, I eat this at my grandma's house every Sunday. She said, you Grandma Black? And I said, she's like, because I think that's where Brené came from. And I was like, no, my grandma's white. And she's like, she's Southern and poor. And I'm like, yes. She's like, okay, that's all. She's like,
That's a great equalizer. Yeah. Oh, wait, okay.
Yes. And then what I realized is like, one of the things I have in common, I think, with a lot of my Black girlfriends, not all, but many, the first was class. You know, was like upbringing, was church, but when you lead that life and you have friends that are different from you, you can't get to the pain point in your book and deny the truth of it because you're the friend they're crying with in the elevator, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know how we're going to fix that because as we become more fearful, we become more sordid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we literally, people are
Go to our
moving.
corners. Yeah.
Right.
You know, we're the most sorted geographically in the history of our country.
Yeah.
That we've ever been. There's this great book called The Big Sort that talks about the shifting demographic where people don't even want to go to grocery stores or church or their kids go to school with people who believe. So how, if we all agree, and I think we agree, right, that you have to live a diverse life if you're going to be a diverse person and leader?
I think the lack of proximity is a huge issue. And, you know, our workspaces some of them are diverse, some of them are not. But if you are in one, even that it's very compartmentalized where it's like, okay, this is what I do here. Then I go to my neighborhood and all of my neighbors are, you know, we look all the same. Our churches are even more segregated now.
I think they are the most segregated.
I don't think it's getting better. Our schools, that's a whole other, you know, and but the thing is, I think at some point we have to, it's about the choices that we make. So how do we, because I think all of those things add up. So we want good schools for our kids, you know, and yet, so that means I got to pick a school in the wealthy neighborhood. I want to make sure, you know, and it's all good intentions, right? Like I want my kid to be safe. I want them to have a good education. I want them to be able to get a great job. So what does that mean? I have to pull myself away and make sure everything around me brings safety for my kids and that they're going to succeed. And at some point, I think we have to think about what's best for the greater good. Like, it's not just about my kid, but it's about the other kids. And not just in our neighborhood, but in our city. Like, how are we, you know, like, I think we just don't think about those things. It's all like, how do I protect my own?
Right. Well, it's hyper individualized, which is also probably a tool of white supremacy because you're only thinking about the individual. You're not thinking about the collective ever. So you're making all of those choices out of that.
When you're thinking about the collective, it's still built on racist ideas.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So the difference between the good school and the bad school, what does that mean?
Right.
Well, and
does that mean black and white?
Right.
Exactly.
Or does that actually mean
Resource.
Resource
poor,
Exactly.
right?
rich,
and is there a place in our imaginations where a good school could be the diverse one?
Yes. Well, there's a sharing of resources. We're not hoarding all the resources in one part.
And everybody gets a free lunch.
Exactly.
And Lord, like that defines a good school.
Okay, I'm gonna be the terrible person here.
Do it.
Go ahead.
That's gonna have to be policy change. No one is going to do that. No one, when it comes to their kid, is going to make a collective political choice over the safety and education of their child if they have the resources to make the change. That is going to have to be like, do you think I've just gotten...
No, but this is the thing.
Do I not believe in people anymore? Like,
but
what's
it happened. We resegregated. There was policy that integrated schools.
Right.
And what happened was that white people were like, hell no, I'm not going to do this.
Policy.
I'm moving.
White flight.
We're going to create, we'd rather see that school like
fail.
fail than send our kids there. So that they have to figure out a way to fix it. So I think like even with policy, it's still like how people have to want that because they will figure out a way around it.
Right.
So here's the good news.
What is it? Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna give you some good news.
I'll take a drink.
I'm gonna drink too.
Cheers to good news.
Okay, cheers to good news. Okay, here's the good news. I hate going back to this because I am the last evangelist for corporations, but I will say that one of the things I'm seeing is there has been a little bit of a loss of that kind of infatuation with the Ivies because they're looking more at hiring people who have had exposure to diverse people and can move around people comfortably. So again,
there are a lot of awkward white people in the world.
there are, oh my God.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Yeah, I am probably one of them too. But I will tell y'all like this story. I took a class. I tell this story sometimes to help people understand some of the things like, so there was a class at UT Austin called The Black Family. And I took this class and I was super excited. The professor of this class, like Ruth McCroy, like famous transracial adoption expert, just incredible. And I go in, and the class is probably 90% Black.
Okay.
And I go in, and I have a seat next to a friend of mine who's in the social work program. And we're talking, she's Black, and we're talking, and class starts, and Dr. McCrory comes to the front, it's just commands, like everybody's quiet, and she's starting to talk about the Black family, and then in bops this young woman, blonde, big ponytail, and I'm like, don't sit next to me. Don't sit next to me. Don't sit next to me. No. And she's coming, and my friend goes, she's coming for you. And I was like, and I was like, oh my God. So she sits next to me, and Dr. McCrory's talking, and she goes, oh. Yeah, and you can just see me scooting next. I was like, and she goes, here's the question I have.
Oh God.
She said, if there was a class at the University of Texas at Austin called the white family, that people would say that was racist. And Dr. McCrory just doesn't move a muscle. She's just like, what's interesting, there are 77 courses at the University of Texas on the family. All of them by default would be the white family. And there was just like, if looks could kill this person. And so by this time, my ass is all the way hanging out. I'm like in the lap of my friend over here. And she says, she's like, don't worry. We can tell y'all apart. I was like, oh my God. But every class period, she would but there were like 75 classes.
What kills me is that white people actually think they've come up with a new thought.
No, it's nothing original.
Like you're right. Like she really believed that she was going to march into that room, and that the professor was not going to have a response.
But everybody was going to go,
that's
true.
Yeah. This is reverse racism. It does exist.
It was.
You found it.
You found,
The one loophole.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was like, but I thought that answer, and then when I don't usually share that whole part of the story. I just share the question, but I don't share my own like awkward white person. Anyway,
Professor, I'd just like to say you're doing a great job.
And I understand clearly why we need this class. Could you imagine?
Brene Brown.
My name's Cassandra. Just in case that makes a difference.
Cassandra Brene Brown here. No, but it was just when people say, but I don't understand, what does that mean? I was like, unless the class is about the Black family or the Latino family, or the default is the white family. Oh, yes. That means all of the research, all of the books, all of the writers, all of the studies, just like when breast cancer research first came out, all the studies on breast cancer on men. Like, people are dying, and so they're like, so the dominant one's invisible? I'm like,
welcome.
I'm sorry that you're in grad school that you're learning this. Like, that is mind-blowing. But it's not.
This was actually an undergrad class, I'll give her credit. And she,
there were a lot of
she didn't stop asking.
Yeah.
No, of course not.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Because that's the difference. Like, I think white people, it doesn't even matter if they are the minority in a group. No. They will always take up, they're comfortable.
Much space as they can.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's always like shocking to me. I'm like, you just feel comfortable in any space you walk into? But that's
actually.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not. Like, I know when I walk, I'm like, I'm sizing up everything.
I know immediately whether or not I need to shrink.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I never see that. And it's just like, wow, it's impressive. And not probably in a good way. But
no, it's not impressive.
I was like, impressive or entitled.
I'm just,
Well,
title, yeah.
But when you don't experience
Exactly.
that,
You're
it
just-
can
you're kind of
it can
shocked.
mask as bravery.
Yeah.
And mask
Oh,
as
it's
courage.
not bravery, yeah.
Well,
No,
it's
no.
not, but not until we've unpacked it.
Right, exactly.
Right? As a Black woman
Yeah.
who is often in rooms as the
Yeah.
only one who's watching
Right.
other women,
Yes.
right? White, but other women
Yes.
command the room. And I'm like, I know I have that in
Right.
me.
Oh, yeah.
Is it bravery? Is it confidence? Or is it both? Like,
Usually in my head, I'm like, well, that's bold.
Well, I think
And then-
entitlement. I think entitlement
right.
is the right
No,
word.
yeah.
I think entitlement is the right
but
word,
is it
yeah.
coming across? I'm like wondering, yeah.
I think it's entitlement, and I think it's built on the foundation of physical safety.
Right.
Wherever you go.
Yeah, I think it's an assumption of physical safety.
Yeah.
Like, and so I
It's
think
true. This is really interesting because white people so often think of themselves as safe, right? That their neighborhoods are safe and their schools are safe and, right, they've done all this work around safety and they're not safe for people of color. But they would never think that about themselves, right? So like the Black neighborhood is the place that's not safe.
Right.
Right? As
Right.
opposed to me being in this ritzy corporate organization, like that's where I'm not safe.
Right.
Or in an all-white neighborhood.
Right.
Rich
Ooh,
neighborhood,
talk about
walking up-
not feeling safe.
No.
It's like the opening of Get Out,
Exactly.
where he's walking and he's like, I don't want
and I feel the temperature in my body rising.
Yeah, that's real.
that's real. Yeah, I just read this interesting study that slowing people down can reduce implicit bias. And so there is what is one of the social media group website things where you can check on things like next door neighbor or next door or something
Yeah, I
like
think it's
that.
called Next Door. Yeah.
Where they have a lot of kind of
All
racist
kinds of
profiling
issues.
of
So many.
Mexican guy in the neighborhood or So she's a professor and a researcher, and they reduced that racial profiling by 75%. By having people, before they could register a complaint or a fear, check 3 boxes. One of them is the definition of racial profiling. And you have to check that you've read the definition of it.
Wow.
And that just slowed people down enough. And it's like, how do we slow people down to recognize the dehumanization,
So there's a Harvard implicit bias test where you have to press the keys to either identify, right? Scary, harmful, whatever. And the only instruction, if I'm remembering correctly, the only instruction is that you have to do it fast. Because if you slow your brain down,
That's right.
then you can interrupt the bias.
That's right.
That's how things happen. It happens
Right,
so quickly.
so
I see that
fast.
person. I probably don't even see their face. And you're like, all I see is their skin color or whatever, how they're dressed
sort
or
of
whatever
marker.
it is.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm going to make my decision and call the cops.
Yep.
And
Or
on
pull
their
the trigger.
Yeah.
That's why representation and
Well,
rhetoric.
and that's why that marble glass matters. That if you're trying to disrupt all of those norms to offset all of these stereotypes that you're getting at,
Accumulating.
that you're accumulating, that your subconscious is absorbing, because that messaging is coming in for all of us, and we have to seek out alternative messaging.
But we also need to fight for leaders. Leaders of color. I was just listening to Stacey Abrams talk about, because people are like, oh yeah, you should run for president. And she's like, no, I was focused on the governorship. And she's like, there's power in that. And think about how many governors of color we have.
Yeah.
You need that at all. It can't just be the president. It's
Right.
got to be at all levels.
We've seen that.
Yeah, exactly.
The
That didn't
intervention
fix
has to
anything.
be, and
There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
there is a lot of work to do. And I think I just think it's got to be micro and macro at the same time. It's got to be, the promotion for the manager that works at Starbucks and the governor and the top leaders.
Yes.
And it's got to be, and I hope you open your heart and come with us. But if you don't, that's okay too, because we're going.
Yeah.
Does that make
We're not
sense?
waiting.
No,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
That's
This
where
is an
I'm headed.
invitation. If
Yeah.
you would
Right.
like to come
Right.
along the
Yeah.
journey, that's great.
Yeah, but
but
we're
you could
going
also
with or
just
without
sit on
you.
the sidelines of history
Right.
if that's what you choose to
And
do.
we'll wave at you as we walk by.
But we
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
And I think people in fear are dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think for some reason, well, not for some reason, we've got nothing but that rhetoric for the last 3 years that power is finite. If I give you a piece, that means I only have 7 pieces left.
Yeah.
As opposed to what I think we all believe, which is power is infinite.
Exactly.
And the more you share it, the more you grow it.
Yes.
It's like empathy or compassion or anything. It's just not finite.
There's
you know?
enough.
There's
enough.
enough.
Yeah.
We're enough.
Yeah.
And there's enough.
Yep.
And I think my commitment is to really keep looking and talking about the grief that happens, I think, especially for women of color who read my book and say, yes, I'm dying under this armor, but it's not safe for me to take it off.
Yeah.
You know, like I resonate with everything you say, but perfect allows me to keep putting food on the table, you know?
Yeah.
And until we get more, to be honest with you, not female leaders, but women of color in leadership positions. And leader positions outside of D&I, outside of
I mean,
yes, we need them there too.
Yeah.
I mean, I love talking about diversity and inclusion. Don't get me wrong. That's my jam. But we should not be relegated to
But that should also be
only.
COO, CFO, CEO. You know, it's got to be in places where the focus is just not people. Because just like you mentioned, it is the right thing for the bottom dollar, for the consumer, for every piece of it.
Yeah. And it's okay to have more than one woman of color in your C-suite.
Imagine.
That's all I'm going to say.
It will not explode.
It will blow up.
Or it will explode in all the right ways.
Yeah.
And I think we all have work to do, myself included, everybody.
Well, I feel like if Black women have to like read all these books and watch these documentaries and understand history, like if we have to do all this work, white people, I'm gonna need for you to not take yourselves off the hook.
I mean, like,
I'll do the work.
read the book, throw it across the room, get up, pick it up, and reread it. And then come talk to them.
Right.
Yeah. I'm in for the long walk.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Brené.
Thank y'all. Thanks for having me.
We don't know how to address the fact that this stuff is still in the air. People tell the story like Dr. King preached the I have a dream speech and then ascended into heaven.
Especially in anti-racism work, I say Black women are 100% experts regardless.
I'm deeply invested in building movements where folks aren't shamed for not coming out of the womb, understanding cis heteropatriarchal violence.
Prison isn't addressing trauma, it's not addressing violence. Prison is a place of trauma and violence.
Everything in the news is just like beating us down. I want to see stories about Black women succeeding and thriving.
Black folks in a white space.
Listen, you find each other.
You may not have shit else in common, but you're gonna be friends, right?
I love all the warm-up questions. I really... I was like, hell, we're here.